The invitation trembled in my daughter Amanda's hand as she screamed words that shattered my world. "You're not family anymore." Her face contorted with a rage I never thought possible from my little girl. 40 years of sacrifice as a single father, erased in an instant. The 3-generation family home around us suddenly felt foreign. I stood frozen, watching her gesture wildly at the wedding invitation she never wanted me to have. She had no idea that tomorrow I would make a decision that would change both our lives forever. No idea that the inheritance she took for granted was about to disappear. I never imagined being a single father. Linda and I had such wonderful plans when Amanda was born. We painted her nursery sunshine yellow and filled it with books because Linda insisted reading to her from day one would make her smart. I can still see Linda rocking our daughter, singing lullabies with that beautiful voice that first made me fall in love with her at the community theater. Cancer took Linda when Amanda was 4 years old. It happened so fast that some mornings I still woke up reaching for her side of the bed. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 3. During those final weeks, she made me promise 2 things: to make sure Amanda remembered her, and to give our daughter the best life possible. I was 32 when I became a widower. Friends and family encouraged me to date again, but I couldn't. My construction business needed attention, and more importantly, Amanda needed stability. So I threw myself into being both mother and father to a confused little girl who spent months asking when mommy was coming home. Our family house became our sanctuary. My grandfather built it with his own hands in the 1940s, and my father expanded it in the 70s. 3 generations of Miller men had poured their hearts into those walls. I maintained every inch of it meticulously. From the oak banister Amanda learned to slide down to the backyard maple tree that held her tire swing. I wanted her to feel the permanence of family, to know that some things lasted even when people didn't. Work became my anchor. I expanded my small construction company, taking every contract I could find. Often I worked 14-hour days, coming home exhausted but always making time for Amanda. We had dinner together every night without exception. I helped with homework, attended every school event, and built her the elaborate dollhouse she wanted for her 8th birthday. The other mothers at school events gave me pitying looks, but I wore my single father status with pride. Money was tight those first few years, but I managed to save enough for what really mattered. Amanda's education fund grew steadily. I wanted her to have opportunities I never had. My father had been adamant that college was a waste of money, pushing me into construction straight out of high school. I was determined Amanda would have choices. The classic cars became my one indulgence. It started with the 1965 Mustang I found abandoned in a client's garage. The owner let me take it as partial payment for a renovation job. Restoring that car gave me something to do during the lonely evenings after Amanda went to bed. Soon I added a 1957 Chevy Bel Air and eventually a 1970 Dodge Charger. Working on those cars provided rare moments of peace in my hectic life. Amanda grew to love those weekend afternoons in the garage. By 12, she could name every tool in my box. By 16, she helped me rebuild an engine. Those greasy-handed Saturdays created a bond between us that I treasured. I always told her the cars would be hers someday, along with the house and everything else I worked for. The lakeside property came later, when Amanda was in high school. A client couldn't pay for a major renovation, offering his 3-acre lakefront plot instead. Initially, I thought I might build a retirement home there someday. But watching Amanda's face light up the first time we visited, I knew it would be her place eventually. She talked about building a house there for her own family someday. I quietly added it to the mental list of things I was saving for her future. Amanda blossomed into a bright, ambitious young woman. She graduated high school with honors and earned a scholarship to State University. I still paid for her apartment, meal plan, and spending money, wanting her to focus on studies rather than part-time jobs. Every dollar seemed worth it when she called home excited about her business classes or new friends. After college, she struggled to find her footing in the corporate world. I supported her through 3 job changes in 2 years, helped with the security deposit on her first apartment, and co-signed when she needed a new car. She was finding her way, and I was proud of her independence, even while making sure she had a safety net. Then she met Troy Harrington at a charity gala her marketing firm organized. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, she was wearing his engagement ring. The first time she brought him to dinner at our home, something felt off. Troy had the polished look of old money, from his tailored blazer to his perfectly manicured nails that had clearly never held a hammer. He surveyed our family home with barely disguised condescension, asking pointed questions about the neighborhood property values. Still, I tried to like him for Amanda's sake. She seemed happy, laughing at his jokes and touching his arm in that way new couples do. But something changed in her around him. She became hyper-aware of our modest surroundings, apologizing for the worn spot on the living room carpet and the outdated kitchen appliances. The same home she once loved suddenly wasn't good enough. After Troy left that first evening, Amanda lingered in the kitchen as I washed dishes. "Troy thinks I should get into real estate development," she said. "His father knows everyone in that business." "I thought you loved marketing," I replied, remembering how excited she'd been about her recent promotion. "Marketing for other people's companies, Dad. This would be an actual career with real money." I dried my hands on a dish towel. "There's nothing wrong with the career you've built." She sighed in that new way that made her sound like a stranger. "You just don't understand. Ambition beyond your level." The words stung more than she knew. I watched my daughter drive away that night, wondering when she'd started seeing my life's work as something to surpass rather than the foundation that made her opportunities possible. I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning of a transformation that would eventually shatter my heart. The invitation to dinner at the Harrington estate came 3 weeks after I first met Troy. Amanda called with detailed instructions about what to wear, suggesting I buy a new sports jacket and tie rather than wear my old funeral suit. She peppered the conversation with advice about which fork to use and reminded me not to talk about construction work or cars. "Just be on your best behavior, Dad," she said, as if I were a child needing guidance. The Harringtons are really important people in this city. The Harrington mansion sat on 5 acres in the wealthiest suburb of our city. A uniformed attendant took my car when we arrived, smirking slightly at my 10-year-old sedan parked among luxury vehicles. Amanda winced visibly, quickly pulling me toward the columned entrance before anyone could associate her with my car. Walter and Sylvia Harrington were exactly what I expected. He wore casual clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She dripped with subtle jewelry and affected the kind of accent people develop when they want to sound vaguely European. Their handshakes were brief, their smiles never reaching their eyes. "Vernon," Walter said, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. "Troy tells me you're in construction." The way he said the word made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. "Yes, sir. Miller Construction. We've been operating in the county for 25 years now." "How quaint," Sylvia murmured. "A family business." Throughout dinner, Walter peppered me with questions that seemed designed to highlight the differences in our worlds. He asked about my education, stopping at high school, my knowledge of wines, non-existent, and my investment portfolio, modest at best. With each answer, Amanda's posture grew more rigid, her smile more forced. After the main course, Walter turned to Amanda. "Troy mentioned you grew up in the old Miller district. Wasn't there that awful incident with the street gangs last year?" Our neighborhood had never seen gang activity. The incident was 2 teenagers spray painting a stop sign. Before I could correct him, Amanda jumped in. "We were on the north side of Miller, the nice part," she said quickly. "Dad's house is very traditional." "Amanda practically grew up in that house," I added. "My father expanded it, and my grandfather built the original structure. 3 generations of our family have lived there." Troy raised an eyebrow. "That explains the interesting layout." Amanda and I were saying it would need complete gutting if anyone wanted to modernize it. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "You were discussing renovating my house?" Amanda shot me a warning look. "Troy's just interested in architecture, Dad." Speaking of family legacy, Sylvia interjected smoothly. Amanda was telling us about her mother's work with international aid organizations. How wonderful that she's carrying on that philanthropic spirit. I stared at Amanda, completely confused. Linda had been a kindergarten teacher before getting sick. My wife passed away when Amanda was 4, I said. She never worked for any aid organizations. The table fell silent. Amanda's face flushed deep red. I think Vernon misunderstood, she said quickly. I was talking about Mom's sister, my Aunt Diane. Amanda didn't have an Aunt Diane. The realization that she was systematically reinventing her background hit me like a physical blow. Throughout the remainder of dinner, I sat in stunned silence, watching my daughter perform as someone I didn't recognize. In the car ride home, Amanda exploded. You completely embarrassed me, she hissed. Why did you have to correct me about Mom? Because you were lying, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. Linda was never involved in international anything. And you don't have an Aunt Diane. You don't understand how these people think, Amanda said. They judge everything. Their family has generational wealth and connections. They vacation with senators. Nobody there respects a simple construction worker who never went to college. The words cut deep. Is that how you see me now? As someone not worthy of respect? She stared out the window without answering. 2 weeks later, I came home early from a job site to find Amanda's car in the driveway. I hadn't expected her, but I was happy for the surprise visit. Entering quietly through the back door, I heard voices in the living room. The wood floors are actually quite nice under this carpet, Amanda was saying. We could restore them and replace all this outdated furniture. Maybe knock out this wall to open up the space. I stepped into the doorway to see Amanda and Troy walking through my living room, gesturing at walls and features as if conducting a property tour. The master bedroom upstairs has the best light, she continued. We could expand it by taking space from the smaller bedroom. Your dad's room? Troy asked. Amanda shrugged. Well, eventually it will be our room, so it makes sense to plan ahead. Are you house shopping? I asked from the doorway, making them both jump. Because last I checked, this one isn't on the market. Amanda recovered quickly, laughing too brightly. Dad, you scared me. We were just imagining. You know, for the far future. Seems like you've got detailed plans for the far future, I said. Troy checked his watch and made a hasty excuse about a conference call, leaving Amanda to deal with the awkwardness. After he left, I confronted her. Want to explain why you're redesigning my house as if you already own it? Don't be dramatic, Dad. I grew up here. Of course I've thought about how I'd update it someday. Someday being after I'm dead? I asked bluntly. She had the grace to look embarrassed. That's not fair. You've always said this house would be mine eventually. You told me everything you have would come to me. That doesn't give you the right to start measuring for curtains while I'm still living here, I said. And what was that lie about your mother working for international organizations? Amanda crossed her arms defensively. Troy's mother is on the board of 5 different charities. His grandmother started a foundation for children in Africa. I can't exactly tell them my mom was just a kindergarten teacher who died young. Just a kindergarten teacher? I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. Your mother was everything to us. How dare you diminish her life that way? It's not diminishing her. It's elevating her story to match the world I'm entering, Amanda replied coldly. These people have expectations. And what about loyalty to who you really are? Who we really are? Amanda gathered her purse, heading for the door. Maybe who we really are isn't good enough anymore. She left me standing alone in the living room that suddenly felt like a stranger's house. The daughter I had raised seemed to be vanishing, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. Someone who was ashamed of me and everything I'd worked for. The realization was a knife twisting in my chest, sharper than I ever could have imagined. The engagement announcement appeared in the Sunday paper before Amanda even told me they'd set a date. A professional photograph showed her and Troy looking polished and perfect, his family's prominence emphasized in the write-up, while I was mentioned only as Vernon Miller, father of the bride. Linda wasn't mentioned at all. When I called Amanda to ask about the wedding plans, her voice had the distracted quality of someone checking email while talking. It's mostly handled, Dad. Sylvia has connections with all the best vendors in the city. I'd like to contribute, I said. It's traditional for the bride's family to help with wedding costs. A long pause followed. That's not necessary. The Harringtons want to host it at their country club. It's already arranged. At least let me pay for your dress, I offered, feeling increasingly sidelined. Troy's grandmother is gifting me her custom Vera Wang. But thanks. Each call followed the same pattern in the following weeks. My offers to help were politely refused, my questions about involvement gently deflected. The wedding was taking shape without any input from me. I didn't even know what date they'd chosen until I received a save-the-date card in the mail, addressed formally to Mr. Vernon Miller. 2 months into the planning process, I finally received a call from Sylvia Harrington. Vernon, she began without preamble. We're finalizing arrangements for the rehearsal dinner. It will be at La Maison Blanche downtown. Cocktail attire, of course. Do you have appropriate evening wear? The question wasn't really a question. I can get a suit, I said. The sound conveyed volumes of doubt. We're aiming for a certain aesthetic. Perhaps you could send photos of your options? I'd be happy to direct you to our family tailor if needed. The suggestion that I couldn't dress myself properly for my own daughter's rehearsal dinner stung, but I swallowed my pride. I'll make sure I look presentable. Wonderful, she replied. Oh, and Amanda mentioned you might be bringing a date? We'll need to know for the seating arrangements. This was news to me. I don't have a date. Oh, Sylvia sounded genuinely surprised. Amanda indicated you were seeing someone. A widow from your neighborhood? Another lie. I hadn't dated anyone seriously since Linda died. There must be some confusion. I'll be coming alone. Very well. We'll seat you at the extended family table then. Extended family. Not at the main table with my own daughter. The implication was clear. I was being categorized as a peripheral figure in Amanda's life. I spent more than $1,000 on a new suit, dress shirt, and tie for the engagement party. The salesman assured me I looked very distinguished, but walking into the Harrington Country Club, I felt like an imposter. Amanda barely greeted me, flitting between guests in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. When I finally managed to speak with her, she immediately straightened my tie. Dad, remember what we talked about. Stick to safe topics. Nothing about work or cars or mom. I can't mention your mother at your engagement party? I asked incredulously. Amanda's smile remained fixed, though her eyes flashed. These people are uncomfortable with tragedy. Keep things light. These people, I repeated. You're becoming one of them, aren't you? Before she could answer, Troy appeared, smoothly inserting himself between us. Amanda, darling, the Whitfields want to congratulate you. He nodded curtly to me. Vernon, I believe the bar is fully stocked if you'd like a drink. I was being dismissed from my own daughter's side. Throughout the evening, I watched her shine in this new environment, laughing at insider jokes and dropping names of people I'd never heard of. She fit seamlessly into Troy's world, while I remained on the periphery, clutching a scotch I didn't really want. Later that week, I met Amanda for lunch, hoping for some one-on-one time. She arrived 30 minutes late, immediately checking her phone as she sat down. Sorry I'm late. Wedding planner crisis. The floral supplier doubled their quote. How much is this wedding costing? I asked. She waved dismissively. Troy's parents insist on handling it. It's no big deal to them. It should be a big deal to you, I said. Starting a marriage with that kind of extravagance sets a concerning precedent. Amanda rolled her eyes. Not everyone thinks being frugal is a virtue, Dad. The waitress arrived to take our orders. I requested a simple burger, while Amanda ordered a salad with numerous modifications. So, I ventured once we were alone again. I've been wondering about the ceremony. I assume I'll be walking you down the aisle? Amanda suddenly became very interested in rearranging her silverware. About that, we're doing things a bit differently. Differently how? The Harringtons have this family tradition where the father of the groom and the mother of the bride escort the couple together. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Since Mom isn't here, Sylvia thought it would be more balanced if Walter walks me down. The pain that shot through me was physical. You're having another man walk you down the aisle at your wedding? It's just a tradition thing, Dad. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? Amanda, I'm your father. I raised you by myself. I've been there for every important moment of your life. And now you're cutting me out of one of the most significant roles a father has? She finally looked up, her expression hardening. This isn't about you. It's about creating the perfect ceremony. The photos will look more symmetrical this way. Photos, I echoed hollowly. You're choosing symmetrical photos over having your father walk you down the aisle. You're still invited to the wedding, she said, as if offering a generous concession. You'll be seated in the family section. I sat back, suddenly unable to recognize the woman across from me. When did you become this person, Amanda? When did appearances start mattering more than family? She checked her phone again. I have to go. The wedding planner needs me to approve something. As she stood to leave, I noticed something odd on her credit card as she paid for her untouched salad. The name read, Amanda Lawrence. You changed your last name? I asked, stunned. She slipped the card back into her wallet quickly. I've been using Mom's maiden name professionally for a while now. Miller is just so common. Lawrence photographs better on business cards. She left me sitting there, trying to process that my daughter had discarded even my name in her quest to reinvent herself. It was as if she were systematically erasing every connection to me and the life we'd shared. When the wedding planning documents arrived by mistake at my house instead of Amanda's apartment the following week, I discovered that not only was I not walking her down the aisle, but I wasn't included in any family photos, had no place in the reception line, and wasn't listed to give a speech or toast. The father of the bride section on every form listed Walter Harrington, stepfather, with a note that the biological father would be attending as a guest. I had been completely written out of my role in my only daughter's wedding. The discovery left me sitting on my porch steps until well after midnight, clutching the papers and wondering how we had arrived at this point. The night air grew cold, but I barely noticed, too numb from the pain of my daughter's betrayal to feel anything else. The formal wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a thick cream envelope with gold calligraphy. Inside, the heavy cardstock announced the union of Amanda Catherine Lawrence and Troy Walter Harrington III, with no mention that Amanda was my daughter. The invitation was addressed simply to Mr. Black's Commister Tevant, Vernon Miller, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than the father who had raised her. I called Amanda immediately, certain there had been a mistake with the printer. The invitation came today, I said when she answered. There seems to be an error. It doesn't mention that you're my daughter, and it has your name as Lawrence. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds too long. That's not a mistake, she finally said. We went with a traditional format that doesn't list parents except for those hosting, which is Troy's family. And the Lawrence name? I legally changed it last month. I told you I've been using it professionally. I gripped the phone tighter. You legally changed your name without telling me? I meant to tell you, she said, though her tone suggested it had been a deliberate omission. Look, can we discuss this later? I'm heading into a meeting. No, Amanda. We need to discuss this now. What's going on? First, I'm not walking you down the aisle. Then I discover I'm not included in family photos. Now I find out you've changed your name, and the invitation doesn't even acknowledge I'm your father. Dad, you're making too big a deal of this. Am I? Because it feels like you're systematically erasing me from your life. Her sigh was heavy with annoyance. Fine. If you must know, Troy's family has concerns about optics. Optics, I repeated. What does that mean? They're worried about how certain elements might look in the wedding. They've invited some very important people, including the mayor and 2 state senators. And I'm one of those concerning elements? The hurt in my voice was evident. Don't twist my words. Her tone hardened. They're worried you might not be comfortable in such a formal setting, that you might feel out of place, or that I might embarrass you. I finished for her. She didn't deny it. That weekend, Amanda unexpectedly showed up at my house with Troy. I hadn't seen her since our phone call about the invitation. She breezed in without really greeting me, Troy trailing behind with a forced smile. We need to talk about the wedding, Dad, she announced. settling herself on the living room sofa. There have been some changes to the arrangements. I remained standing, arms crossed. What kind of changes? Troy cleared his throat. My parents have concerns about the guest list getting too unwieldy. They've had to make some adjustments to keep numbers manageable. What he means, Amanda interjected, is that we need to discuss your role at the wedding. My role? I thought my role had already been eliminated. I'm not walking you down the aisle, not in family photos, not giving a toast. What's left to discuss? Amanda pulled the wedding invitation from her purse, the same one I'd received days earlier. This invitation. It was sent prematurely. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Meaning what? Meaning there's been a change in the seating arrangements, Troy said, his corporate smile never faltering. The family section has been consolidated due to space constraints. Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes. What we're saying is that we think it might be better if you attended just the ceremony, not the reception. The words hung in the air between us. You're uninviting me from half of your wedding? Not uninviting, Troy corrected smoothly. Modifying your attendance parameters. I laughed bitterly. Modifying my attendance parameters. Is that corporate speak for cutting your bride's father from the guest list? Amanda finally looked up, her expression hardening. This is exactly why we're concerned, Dad. You always make everything so difficult. You can't just go with the flow and understand that some adjustments need to be made for a wedding of this caliber. A wedding of this caliber, I repeated. And I'm not up to caliber, is that it? Troy interjected. Vernon, no one is saying that. It's simply a matter of cultural fit. Something in me snapped. Cultural fit? I'm her father. What exactly don't I fit with? The aesthetic we're creating, Amanda said coldly. The Harringtons have a certain image to maintain. This wedding is being photographed for City Society magazine. Everything needs to be perfect. And I'd ruin your perfect pictures? I asked, voice rising. The man who worked double shifts to put you through college? Who never missed a single school event? Who taught you to drive and helped you move into your first apartment? That man would embarrass you? Amanda stood abruptly, face flushed. Yes, you would embarrass me. With your off-the-rack suits and your construction worker hands and your stories about carburetors? These people are sophisticated, Dad. They vacation in the Maldives and have private jets. They wouldn't understand someone like you, someone like me, I echoed. You mean someone who sacrificed everything for his child? Oh, please, not the martyr routine again. You chose not to go to college. You chose to stay in construction. You chose to stay in this outdated house in this mediocre neighborhood. Don't blame me for wanting more. She was practically shouting now, waving the wedding invitation in my face. This is why we're rethinking your involvement. You always make everything about you and your sacrifices. Amanda, Troy warned quietly, clearly uncomfortable with her outburst. She ignored him. Years of something I hadn't realized was resentment pouring out of her. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is explaining you to Troy's family? They ask what you do, and I have to say construction, while everyone else's parents are surgeons and executives. They ask where you live, and I have to describe this house that hasn't been updated since the 90s. They ask about Mom, and the pitying looks when I say she died are unbearable. Her words felt like physical blows. I stumbled back slightly, steadying myself against the wall. So that's it? You're ashamed of me? Of our life together? I'm not ashamed, she said, though her expression said otherwise. I've just outgrown all this. I'm entering a different world, and you don't fit in it. She thrust the invitation at me again, pointing to the fine print at the bottom. See this? It says the ceremony begins at 3. What it doesn't say is that family needs to arrive at 1 for photos. You're not needed for photos, obviously. Obviously, I repeated hollowly. And there's a separate reception card that wasn't included with your invitation. That was intentional. Troy finally stepped forward. What Amanda is trying to say is that we think it would be best if you attended the ceremony only, sitting in the general guest section rather than the family section. It would be more comfortable for everyone. I looked between them, these strangers in my living room. More comfortable for everyone except me. Amanda's face hardened further. If you can't handle these simple adjustments, maybe it would be better if you didn't come at all." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my daughter, searching for any sign of the loving child I had raised. There was nothing familiar in her cold eyes. "You don't mean that," I said quietly. She snatched the invitation back, crumpling it slightly in her grip. "Maybe I do. Maybe it would be easier than dealing with your guilt trips and working-class dramatics." "Amanda," Troy cautioned again, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "No, Troy. He needs to hear this. I've spent my entire life trying to overcome where I came from. I've worked so hard to fit into your world, to be someone your family would accept. I'm not going to let him ruin that now." She turned back to me, eyes blazing. "If you can't accept the limited role we're offering, then maybe you shouldn't be part of the wedding at all." I felt strangely calm as I asked, "Is that what you really want, Amanda? For your father not to attend your wedding?" She raised the crumpled invitation like a weapon. "You're not family anymore?" she screamed, her face contorted. "Not the kind of family I need now. Not the kind that fits into my new life." The words echoed in the room where I had read her bedtime stories, bandaged, scraped knees, and celebrated birthdays. Where I had built a life around being her father. "I see," I said quietly. "Thank you for making that clear." Troy looked genuinely shocked at Amanda's outburst. "Amanda, let's take a breath. Vernon is still your father. Biologically," she spat. "But fathers are supposed to help their daughters advance in life, not hold them back with their embarrassing blue-collar backgrounds." She stormed toward the door, pausing only to deliver a final blow. "And just so you know, Troy and I have already planned how we'll renovate this place once we inherit it. We'll probably sell those old cars too. They're taking up valuable garage space we could convert to a home gym." The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone in the suddenly silent house. Through the window, I watched Troy attempting to calm Amanda in the driveway. She gestured wildly toward the house, face still contorted with anger. They drove away without a backward glance, leaving me standing in the home they were already planning to claim and transform. In that moment, something broke inside me. But something else, something I hadn't felt in years, began to stir. A sense of self-preservation I had long subordinated to being Amanda's father. The realization that perhaps it was time to start thinking about my own life, my own future, and my own worth. For 3 days after Amanda's outburst, I moved through the house like a ghost. I called in sick to work for the first time in years, unable to focus on anything but the echo of my daughter's words. "You're not family anymore." I touched the banister she once slid down, stood in the kitchen where we'd baked birthday cakes, and sat motionless in the backyard watching the tire sway gently in the breeze. On the 4th day, my old friend Jack called. We'd been friends since high school, and he'd watched Amanda grow up. Now a successful attorney, he'd remained firmly grounded in his working-class roots. "You missed poker night," he said. The guys were worried. I found myself telling him everything about Amanda, Troy, the Harringtons, and the wedding disinvitation. The words poured out unchecked, all the hurt and confusion I'd been carrying alone. Jack listened without interruption until I finished. "Vernon," he said finally, "I'm going to ask you something important, and I want you to think before answering. What has Amanda contributed to your life in the last 5 years?" The question caught me off guard. "She's my daughter." That's not what I asked. "What has she given to your relationship? Not when she was a child, but as an adult. Has she been there for you? Shown appreciation? Reciprocated even a fraction of what you've done for her?" I sat with the question, searching for examples and finding few. Our relationship had become increasingly one-sided, with me giving and Amanda taking. "She's busy building her life," I said weakly. "No," Jack countered. "She's busy erasing the life you built for her. There's a difference." His bluntness startled me, but something in his words resonated. Amanda wasn't just moving forward. She was actively rejecting everything about our shared past. "What do I do, Jack?" He sighed. "I can't tell you that. But I will say this. You've spent 40 years being Amanda's father. Maybe it's time you focused on being Vernon for a while." After we hung up, I walked through the house with new eyes. Every room held memories, but they now felt like anchors rather than comforts. I'd preserved everything exactly as it had been when Amanda was growing up, as if keeping her childhood intact would somehow keep her connected to me. In my home office, I found the folder containing my will and financial documents. Everything was left to Amanda, every decision made with her future in mind. The house, the classic cars, the lakefront property, my modest investment portfolio, and the construction company I'd built from nothing. All designated for a daughter who now saw them as entitlements rather than gifts. That evening, I called my financial advisor, Martin, and asked him to come by the house the next day. When he arrived, I laid out my situation candidly. I need to make some changes, I told him. I want to know my options for liquidating assets and reinvesting for my own future. Martin looked surprised. These assets have been earmarked for Amanda's inheritance for years. Plans change. People change. I handed him the folder with my current will and financial directives. I need to know what I can sell quickly and what would be better to hold. Over the next 2 hours, Martin outlined my financial position. The family home had appreciated significantly, now worth nearly 3 times what it had been when I inherited it. The lakefront property had quintupled in value as the area developed. My classic car collection, particularly the fully restored 1957 Chevy, had become quite valuable in the collector's market. You're in a stronger position than you might think, Martin concluded. If you sold everything, you'd have a substantial sum to reinvest for your retirement. But are you sure about this? These decisions will be difficult to reverse. I thought about Amanda and Troy discussing how they'd renovate the dump and sell off my beloved cars. About the daughter who had changed her name and denied our connection. I'm sure, I said. Let's start with the cars and the lakefront property. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. I contacted a prestigious auto museum that had previously expressed interest in my Chevy. They were ecstatic to acquire it along with the Mustang and Charger, offering a surprisingly generous sum for the collection. The curator who came to inspect them noted that they were some of the finest restoration work he'd seen. These weren't just cars to you, were they? He asked as we stood in my garage. They were therapy, I admitted, and connections to my daughter, once. He nodded understandingly. We'll take good care of them. They'll be appreciated by thousands of visitors. The lakefront property sold even more quickly. A developer had been eyeing the area for an upscale residential community and jumped at the chance to acquire my 3 acres. The price they offered was substantially above market value, enough to secure my financial future on its own. The hardest decision was the family home. 3 generations of Miller men had put their hearts into those walls. But as I walked through the rooms, I realized I was preserving a museum to a family that no longer existed. My father and grandfather were gone. My wife was gone. And now, in a different way, my daughter was gone too. I contacted a real estate agent who specialized in historic homes in established neighborhoods. She was confident the house would sell quickly, especially with its craftsmanship and character. We listed it the following week, and sure enough, an offer came in within days. A young family with 2 small children who loved the backyard maple tree and the hand-carved banister. As these transactions progressed, I found myself going through closets and storage spaces, deciding what to keep and what to let go. In Amanda's old bedroom, preserved like a shrine since her college days, I discovered a box of her childhood drawings and letters. One envelope contained Mother's Day cards she'd made for Linda after her death, which I'd helped her create each year so she'd feel connected to her mom. Another held a series of Father's Day cards spanning her childhood and teens. The earliest ones featured crayon stick figures and misspelled words. "Best dad ever," one proclaimed in wobbly kindergarten handwriting. A later one, from her 16th birthday, read, "Thanks for teaching me that being strong means having both greasy hands from fixing cars and a soft heart for people you love." I sat on her childhood bed, cards spread around me, trying to reconcile these expressions of love with the woman who had screamed that I wasn't family anymore. Somewhere along the way, The daughter who had written these cards had disappeared, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. One particular letter caught my eye. Amanda had written it when she left for college. "Dad, I'm scared to leave home, but I know I'll be okay because you taught me how to be brave. You showed me that love means showing up every day, not just for the big moments but for all the small ones in between. I promise I'll make you proud, and never forget where I came from or how hard you worked to get me here. You're my hero, today and always. Love, Mandy." She'd signed it with the childhood nickname she'd abandoned in high school when she decided it sounded too juvenile. The contrast between the loving daughter who wrote this letter and the cold woman who had disinvited me from her wedding was stark and painful. But something unexpected happened as I packed away these memories. Instead of deepening my hurt, they helped me understand that the problem wasn't with me. I had been a good father. I had given Amanda everything I could. Her rejection wasn't a reflection of my failings, but of her own transformation into someone who valued status over substance. As the closing date for the house approached, I began looking for my own fresh start. I researched coastal towns within a few hours' drive, places with smaller communities and opportunities to use my construction skills. A small craftsman bungalow in a seaside community caught my eye, needing renovations but with good bones and character. I made an offer, using a portion of the proceeds from the lakefront property sale. The day before Amanda's wedding, I signed the final papers for the sale of the family home. The young couple buying it was excited to move in, already planning where their Christmas tree would go and which bedroom would belong to each child. Watching their joy, I felt a weight lifting. The house would have a new family to fill it with love and memories. That evening, Jack came by to help me pack the last of my belongings. We sat on folding chairs in the nearly empty living room, sharing a bottle of whiskey and 40 years of friendship. "Are you going to the wedding tomorrow?" he asked. I nodded. "I'll attend the ceremony. Sit in the back as instructed. Then I'll leave before anyone notices." "You're a better man than I am," Jack said, raising his glass in salute. "Not better," I replied. "Just finishing what I started. After tomorrow, I can begin again." We toasted to new beginnings, surrounded by the empty spaces of my past life and the packed boxes of whatever future awaited me. For the first time since Amanda's betrayal, I felt something like peace. The hurt remained, but alongside it grew a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in decades. The morning of Amanda's wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect day brides dream about. I dressed carefully in my new suit, checking my appearance one last time in the hotel mirror. I'd moved out of the family home the previous day, my essential belongings in storage, and a small suitcase packed for my new beginning. The Harrington Country Club was transformed for the occasion, with white roses and crystal decorations adorning every surface. Security guards checked invitations at the entrance. I presented mine and received a tight smile and directions to the general seating area. The ceremony space was divided into clear sections. At the front, elaborate floral arrangements framed an altar draped in white silk. The first several rows were labeled "Family" with gold-lettered placards. Beyond those, separated by a tasteful velvet rope, were the rows for ordinary guests like me. I took a seat in the last row of the general section, where I could observe without being observed. Other guests filtered in, everyone dressed impeccably, air-kissing and exchanging social pleasantries. No one approached or recognized me. I was just another anonymous face in the crowd, not the father of the bride. The string quartet began playing, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. The wedding party processed in perfect choreography, bridesmaids in pale blue gowns, groomsmen in tailored tuxedos. Troy entered with his mother on his arm, both beaming with practiced smiles. Then the music changed to the traditional bridal march, and the crowd rose. Amanda appeared at the entrance on Walter Harrington's arm, radiant in a designer gown with a cathedral-length veil. She looked beautiful but somehow unfamiliar, like a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Her smile was polished to perfection, her posture regal as Walter escorted her down the aisle where I should have been. I felt a strange detachment watching this scene, as if observing a play about someone else's life. The daughter I had raised would never have excluded me from this moment. This Amanda was someone else entirely, a character crafted to fit into the Harrington world. The ceremony proceeded with flawless precision. Vows were exchanged, rings presented on a silk pillow by a perfectly behaved ring-bearer. Not once did Amanda glance toward the general seating area where her father sat. Her focus remained entirely on Troy, Walter, and Sylvia, her new chosen family. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the audience applauded with elegant restraint. Troy kissed Amanda with appropriate passion, not too much to be unseemly, not too little to seem cold. Everything about the moment was calculated for maximum aesthetic appeal, perfect for the Society magazine photographs being taken from every angle. As the newlyweds recessed down the aisle, Amanda passed within a few feet of where I sat. For a brief instant, her eyes met mine. A flicker of something crossed her face, too quick to interpret. Recognition? Guilt? Defiance? Whatever it was vanished immediately, as she continued past without acknowledgement, her hand firmly gripping Troy's arm. The guests were directed to the reception area for cocktails and dinner. I remained seated as people filed out, watching the flurry of activity as the wedding planner directed photographers for family portraits near the altar. Amanda and Troy posed with his parents, all four arranging themselves in various configurations. Extended family members were called forward to join certain groupings. Not once was my name called. When the ceremony space had emptied, I finally stood and made my way to the exit. A server with a tray of champagne flutes tried to direct me toward the reception. I smiled and shook my head. I was just here for the ceremony, I explained. Outside in the parking lot, I paused to look back at the country club with its manicured grounds and valet parking. Inside, my daughter was celebrating the beginning of her new life with her chosen family. A life that had no place for me. I drove directly to the attorney's office, where the final paperwork waited for the sale of the family home. The buyers had agreed to an unusual closing date, and everything was prepared for the transaction to complete immediately. I signed where indicated, formally transferring ownership of the house that had sheltered 3 generations of my family. The funds will be in your account by close of business today, the attorney assured me. Thank you for accommodating the unusual timing, I replied. Not at all. The buyers are quite excited to move in tomorrow. Tomorrow. When Amanda and Troy returned from their wedding to begin implementing their renovation plans, they would find strangers living in what they had assumed would be their inheritance. I checked into a different hotel that evening, not wanting to be found if Amanda discovered what I'd done and came looking for me. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I finally allowed myself to fully feel everything I'd been suppressing. The grief of losing my daughter, the anger at her betrayal, the bittersweet relief of freeing myself from a one-sided relationship. My phone remained silent. No call from Amanda wondering where I'd disappeared to after the ceremony. No message asking why I hadn't stayed for the reception. The absence of contact confirmed what I already knew. I had become irrelevant to her life. That night, I overheard a conversation in the hotel bar between 2 guests who had attended the wedding. Gorgeous affair, one woman said. Although, did you notice how the bride barely spoke to anyone outside the Harrington circle? Struck me as a bit calculated. Well, she's certainly married up, her companion replied. My daughter went to school with Amanda. Said she wasn't surprised at all by the transformation. Apparently, she's been working that angle since she met Troy. I heard the father is some sort of construction worker, wasn't even in the family photos, probably didn't fit the aesthetic they were going for. I finished my drink and left before I could hear more. Their casual cruelty, a reminder of the world Amanda had chosen. In my hotel room, I finalized arrangements for movers to collect my stored belongings the following day and transport them to my new home on the coast. I had already transferred management of my construction company to my longtime foreman, with plans to sell him the business in installments so he could afford the purchase. Everything was in place for my new beginning. All that remained was the moment Amanda would discover what her actions had cost her. Morning came with a sense of finality. I checked out of the hotel and drove one last time past the family home. The new owner's moving truck was already in the driveway, friendly movers carrying furniture and boxes into the house. A chapter closing, another opening. As I turned to leave, I noticed a familiar car approaching from the opposite direction. Amanda's sleek European sedan, with Troy in the passenger seat. They pulled up behind the moving truck, confusion evident on their faces as they stepped out. I didn't stay to witness the confrontation. Whatever words would be exchanged between Amanda and the new homeowners were no longer my concern. The daughter who had declared I wasn't family anymore would discover that family ties worked both ways. The inheritance she had taken for granted, like my love, had never been an entitlement but a gift. A gift she had rejected along with me. Driving away, I felt no satisfaction or vindication, only a quiet certainty that I was finally doing what I should have done years ago, living for myself rather than for a daughter who no longer wanted my presence in her life. The road ahead stretched toward the coast, and whatever new purpose awaited me there. The coastal town of Millport welcomed me with salty air and friendly neighbors. My bungalow, though smaller than the family home, had character and potential. The previous owners had neglected it, but my construction background made the needed renovations a welcome project rather than a burden. I spent the first few weeks settling in, introducing myself to neighbors, and beginning to map out the work the house needed. 2 weeks after the wedding, as I was removing damaged drywall in what would become my home office, my phone rang with Amanda's number. It was the first contact since the wedding day. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided to face whatever was coming. "Hello, Amanda," I said evenly. "What have you done?" Her voice trembled with fury. "We went to the house the day after the wedding, and there were strangers living there. They said they bought it from you." "That's correct," I replied, setting down my tools. "I sold the house." "You can't do that. That house has been in our family for 3 generations. It was supposed to be mine." I noted the possessive claim. "Not ours, but mine. The house belonged to me, Amanda. I was free to sell it if I chose to." "But why would you do that? Where are you even living now?" The outrage in her voice was palpable. "I've moved to the coast. Bought a small place that needs some work." "The coast? What about the construction company? What about all your things?" "I've arranged for Dale to buy the company from me in installments. He's been with me for 20 years. He'll do well with it. As for my things, I kept what mattered and sold the rest." A long silence followed then. "The cars? The lakefront property?" "The cars went to the National Auto Museum. They'll be appreciated there. The lakefront property sold to a developer." Her breathing quickened. I could almost see her calculating the financial implications. "How could you do this without telling me? That was my inheritance." "Was it? I thought I wasn't family anymore." The words hung between us. I heard her intake of breath, then Troy's voice in the background asking questions I couldn't make out. "This is unacceptable," she finally said. "We had plans for that house. We already hired an architect to draw up renovation blueprints." "Yes, I remember you mentioning your plans to gut the dump after you inherited it. Seems presumptuous to plan renovations for a house that wasn't yours." "Dad, this isn't funny. You've ruined everything. The house was supposed to be our starter home until we could afford something in the Harrington neighborhood. Troy's parents expected us to have property assets." The truth emerged at last. The house wasn't about family heritage or memories. It was a stepping stone in Amanda's social climbing strategy. "I'm sorry your plans have been disrupted," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But actions have consequences, Amanda. You made it very clear I wasn't part of your family anymore. Family inheritances generally go to family members." I was upset. People say things when they're stressed about their wedding. You weren't just stressed. You were deliberately cruel. You changed your name to erase our connection. You had another man walk you down the aisle. You excluded me from family photos and seated me with distant acquaintances. Those weren't stress reactions, Amanda. They were choices." I heard muffled conversation. Then Troy came on the line. "Vernon, this is completely unacceptable. We had financial plans based on the projected value of those assets. Amanda's portfolio presentation to my family included the property values. Portfolio presentation? I asked, incredulous. Yes, part of our marriage agreement included a full financial disclosure to my parents. Amanda presented her expected inheritance as part of her contribution to our marital assets. I almost laughed at the absurdity. You had my daughter create a portfolio of assets she didn't own to impress your parents? The Harrington family doesn't welcome members who don't bring value to the table, Troy said stiffly. Amanda assured us her inheritance was substantial. Well, she was mistaken. The assets were mine, not hers. And I've made other arrangements for them. I heard Amanda wrestling the phone back. Dad, you have to undo this. The contracts, the sales, whatever you did. Troy's parents are furious. They think I misrepresented myself. You did misrepresent yourself, I said quietly. To them, to Troy, and most of all to me. You presented yourself as someone who valued status over family. I simply took you at your word. Please, her voice cracked slightly. We can work this out. Maybe we can buy the house back from whoever you sold it to. I'll pay more than they did. The house is gone, Amanda. So are the cars and the lakefront property. I've donated a significant portion of the proceeds to the children's hospital where your mother was treated. The rest is invested for my retirement. There's nothing to work out. You donated my inheritance to charity? She screeched. How could you be so vindictive? It wasn't vindictive. It was liberating. And as I said the words, I realized they were true. For decades, I've lived my life around what you needed or what I thought you might need someday. When you made it clear you didn't want me in your life anymore, you freed me to live for myself. This isn't over, she threatened. I'll talk to a lawyer. You can't just disinherit your only child. Actually, I can. And I have. Goodbye, Amanda. I ended the call and returned to my renovation work, finding unexpected peace in the simple act of repairing damaged walls. The confrontation I dreaded was over, and I had survived it intact. 3 days later, a formal letter arrived from an attorney representing Amanda and Troy, demanding I reverse the sales and reestablish Amanda as my heir. Jack called shortly after I received it. Amanda contacted me, he said. Wanted to know if I'd represent her in a case against you. I declined, obviously. Thank you for that. Her new attorney sent a threatening letter. Jack snorted. It's posturing. She has no legal claim to assets you owned outright. The fact that you once intended to leave them to her doesn't create an obligation. I never wanted it to come to this, I admitted. I just wanted to be valued as her father, not as a source of assets. I know, Vernon. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Not just for yourself, but possibly for Amanda too. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their choices to grow. Over the following months, I settled into my new life in Millport. I joined a local community center where I taught weekend carpentry classes to kids. I made friends with my neighbors, particularly Grace and Henry Watson, a retired couple next door who invited me for dinner and introduced me to their book club. The legal threats from Amanda eventually fizzled out, just as Jack predicted. The last communication I received was a tersely worded email stating she was terminating further correspondence. Reading between the lines, I suspected Troy's interest in pursuing the matter had waned once he realized there were no assets to recover. 6 months after the wedding, a plain white envelope arrived with Amanda's handwriting on the address. Inside was a brief note. Dad, Troy and I have separated. His parents were not pleased when the promised financial assets didn't materialize. They've been even less pleased with the quarterly portfolio reviews where Troy's trust fund performance is compared to his brother's. I've moved into an apartment on my own and returned to my marketing job. Things look different now than they did 6 months ago. This isn't an apology yet. I'm still angry, and part of me still believes you acted out of spite. But I'm beginning to understand that I made choices that hurt you deeply, and those choices had consequences I didn't anticipate. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know where things stand. Amanda. She had signed it Amanda, not Mandy, but also not Amanda Lawrence. A small step perhaps, but a step nonetheless. I didn't respond immediately. The hurt was still too fresh, the breach of trust too profound. But I kept the note, tucking it into my desk drawer. Maybe someday there would be room for reconciliation, but it would need to be built on honesty and mutual respect, not obligation or inheritance expectations. A year after moving to Millport, my bungalow renovation was complete. The once neglected house now shone with restored hardwood floors, updated but character-appropriate fixtures, and fresh paint in warm, welcoming colors. The back deck I'd added provided a perfect view of sunsets over the water. I'd found purpose in the community, volunteering with a program that built accessible home modifications for elderly residents who wanted to age in place. My construction skills were valued and appreciated in ways they never had been by Amanda and the Harringtons. I'd also found friendship and perhaps the beginnings of romance with Diana, a widow who ran the local bookstore and shared my love of classic cars. We took long walks on the beach, attended community events together, and enjoyed quiet evenings discussing books and sharing stories of our previous lives. As I sat on my deck one evening, watching the sunset with Diana beside me, I realized I was happier than I'd been in years. The pain of Amanda's rejection hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had subsided into something manageable, a dull ache rather than a sharp wound. "Penny for your thoughts," Diana said, noticing my contemplative mood. "I was thinking about how lives change," I replied. "How doors close and others open." "Regrets?" she asked gently. "No," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "Lessons." 2 years to the day after Amanda's wedding, another envelope arrived, thicker than the last. Inside was a multi-page letter, this one signed Mandy. It detailed her journey of self-reflection, her regrets about the choices she'd made, and her gradual understanding of the damage she'd done to our relationship. She wrote of therapy sessions where she'd begun to unpack her insecurities and materialistic values. She didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, only acknowledged her role in what had happened, and expressed hope that I was finding happiness in my new life. This time, I did respond. Not with immediate forgiveness, but with an opening, a willingness to begin a conversation that might someday lead back to a relationship. A different relationship than before, between two adults rather than father and dependent daughter, but perhaps in time, something meaningful. Life had taught me an unexpected lesson through this painful journey. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on, but letting go. Letting go of expectations, of one-sided relationships, of the belief that sacrifice alone can maintain a bond. I had spent decades defining myself primarily as Amanda's father, sublimating my own needs and identity to that role. In losing that definition, I had found something equally valuable: myself. The house and cars and property had never been what truly mattered. They were just things, symbols of a connection that should have been based on deeper values. In selling them, I hadn't lost anything essential. I had simply cleared away the distractions that had allowed both Amanda and me to avoid facing the truth about our relationship. Sitting on my deck that evening after reading Amanda's letter, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, I felt a sense of completion. Whatever happened with Amanda in the future, whatever relationship we might or might not rebuild, I had found my way forward. I had created a life that was authentically mine, filled with purpose, friendship, and the possibility of new love. The inheritance I had once saved for Amanda had ultimately given me a different kind of legacy, the freedom to begin again, and that, perhaps, was the most valuable gift of all. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the moment, but ultimately led to personal growth? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more reflections on family, forgiveness, and finding your way forward in life's challenging moments. Share with someone who might need to be reminded that it's never too late to start over and create a life that truly reflects your worth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own.